Hello and welcome back to this course, like small little course on ReactQuery. In the last couple of lessons, we went over queries, right? We went over fetching data, but how do you update this data? So that's what we're going to be talking today, and that is called mutations. The first one that we're going to do is about adding something like to this expense tracker. So let me, I don't know, grocery. And the idea is that I can type something here, then enter 20. Okay, actually minus 20. Add a transaction, and this is what I want to pass, right? And we have a constants file already, right? And we know that this is the API URL. So we can get all our stuff from here, and the way to add something is to just post it to this URL. Okay, so let's check how we would just go about, just posting to this URL first, right? Okay, so we have an add a transaction, and we actually need this, so that's fine. So the first thing that we would do is await a fetch. You could do something else like Axios, which sometimes is easier. I just don't bother in most of the cases, to be fair. And then we do need some options. So the first thing that I'm going to pass is the body, and the body is this. So we need to JSON.stringify it first. And we also need headers because he needs the, the content type. So I need to pass content type and then application JSON. Okay, cool. And the last thing is the method. And, this should work, right? So the method is a post. So if we do this correctly, like we're posting to this URL and we're adding this body as JSON stringify, and I guess it should work, right? If I try this again, nothing is going to happen. But if I reload this page, also nothing is going to happen. So let's see what happens. So if I, close this, go to the console, because that's what I care about, and enter groceries and then minus 20. Wow, there's a bunch of errors here. None is not a value. All right, minus 20. I guess I clicked something. The post 404 not found. You know why? I'm going to explain to you why. Because I didn't actually import the URL, and it was actually called API URL. So I guess that actually made sense, right? So if I go to the network now and I check it out, I wish I could pull that thing up. I think I've said it like 5 times already. Yep, it added it. So now if I reload this page, there you go. It adds the groceries. But that's not a very good experience, right? I mean, pretty obvious. So what is so good about mutations? The thing about mutations is that, first of all, we can encapsulate it into one place. So we're gonna, you guessed it, create a hook. But it's also good because you can run things on success and on error and all of that stuff. So let's first of all create a hook. So I'm gonna command B here on the side and say use create transaction. That's a yes. And I'm gonna be very lazy, rename this file and then copy that and export const use create transaction and just create this hook. Okay, cool. So the first thing we can do is literally copy and paste this into there, and this is going to be a sync. So we can do this, and we can call the fetch function. So this is the fetch function, and this fetch function will do, oh my god, we'll do this, right? We good. I mean, we're terrible. We're not going anywhere here, but we'll get somewhere. So let me first import this. And now we're going to actually import use mutation. So I'm going to say const mutation. You can call it anything. So I'm going to call it add transaction equals use mutation. And in here, the first parameter that you pass is a function. And in this function, you run your actual, fetch function, I guess. That's what you can call it. So you put that in here. And in here, you put anything you want to pass into it. So in this case, we want the amount and the description, right? And so far, so good. So if I just return this, so I say return add transaction, I should be able to import it here. So I say const add transaction equal to use create transaction, I think. Yeah, cool. I have an issue. Interesting issue. Use create transaction. I'm going to call create transaction. Okay, create transaction, and now I do the same thing here. Perfect. We can delete this. So now if I console download this, we're gonna see that we have a couple of things here. We first of all have a promise, which we actually do not need. This does not need to be async, because anything in here does not need to, you don't need to specify that it's async. So if I do the same thing now, we have a bunch of stuff, right? But the thing that we really care about here is mutate. So we have two things. You have mutate, which is an await function. So I can say await create transaction.mutate. And in here, in the mutate function is where I pass these bad boys. Or you can call mutate async. So I'm just gonna call mutate. I'm gonna say await create transaction.mutate, and then we pass the description and the amount. So if you think about it, or I think about it, I don't know who has to think about it in this case, this should do the exact same thing. So if I type, you know, did I type dinner? Okay, so now it's lunch, and it's minus 12 euros. I clean everything, and then I add transaction, all good, and now we have lunch. Cool. But how do we actually just invalidate this and refetch it? I mean, do another query for this. That's where the best thing about this comes in. So use mutation. After this function, you can pass an object, which is with a lot of like functions that will run. So for example, if I pass on error, you also have on settled, on success, all of that kind of stuff. And in here, you run anything you want to happen on success. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to invalidate a couple of queries. And for that, we need to fetch our query client. So we can say const query client equals use query client. And in here, I can say query client that invalidate queries. And I can just pass as many queries as I want. In this case, I just want to pass a transactions query. And now, if we do the exact same thing, it should work. So if I type lol here and then I type 20, you can see that now we have lol with 20. It's that nice. But this is not clean, and we want to run something when it's done, right? On success, we want to run something. So in this case, I can just call on success again and pass the on success as a parameter here. And we can also pass anything else. So I'm going to say ReactQuery callbacks, maybe. And then I can also just, after this, do ReactQuery callbacks. And reload this page. And I think we have an error, which is construct property on success of undefined. Okay, this makes sense. So I need to come here and actually pass the on success. So on use create transaction, we can say on success. Wait, no, it's not here. No, it is here. Sorry. I'm very confused at this point. We passed it on success, and what we want to do on success is just set the amount and set the description. So just clean everything up. So now if I come here and I type lol1 and I enter an amount of 54 and I add a transaction, you can see that it almost worked, but it didn't. It's because I need to set the amount to something empty. In here, it should be the same thing. So if I do, yeah, exactly. If I do lol2 and I do 21, add transaction, everything is cleaned. So this is mostly what I want to show you, but I also want to show you if an error happens. So I want to say on error. And then here I can say, I just know, alert, oh no. And to just force an error, I'm just like not gonna just do this or some shit. Some almost cursed. Oh my god, I can't believe it. And do this. Okay, actually. And you can see that on error, it says, oh no. So there is a bunch of these functions that you have. So if you have on error, on mutate, on settled, you also can retry things. It's great. So yeah, this is our first one. The next one that I want to show you is very similar to this one. And yeah, it's just about deleting. Because you may find it weird that I created things called lol1 and lol2. And that's because we're going to delete it. So I'm generally going to duplicate this. Use delete transaction. .js. Cool, so now we have this. And what we want to do is we want to post a delete. We don't need any of this. And I need to go to, we need the ID. And to delete something, I have to go to the API URL plus the ID. So I can show you how the URL actually looks afterwards, but it's just the API URL that I need to check if it has a slash. It does not. And slash whatever ID I pass it. And in this case, we do the exact same thing. So we invalidate that query. Okay, cool. So let's come here and let's rename this to use delete transaction. And rename this to delete transaction. And let's see what happens when there's an error. Okay, I'm just not using that. So if I come here to the transactions, I have a single one here. So let me close this and open this. We have a delete transaction here, right? And that's when you click this little one. Okay, so on delete transaction. And let me also do something because I know I'm not going to use it. So this defaults it to an empty object. So if you don't pass anything, it doesn't break. Remember that error that we got that I was like, oh no. Yeah, that was because of that. Okay, so I can say const delete. I'm just going to call it delete mutation equals use delete transaction. And I don't need to pass it anything. And as you can see, it still does not break. So in here on delete transaction, I can say delete mutation that mutate. I'm going to call async this time just because, you know, and ID equals transaction.id. So now if I try to delete this, it gives me an error. Success is not a function. And that's actually very important. You should always check if this is here. If onSuccess actually run onSuccess, which makes sense. But did we delete it? We actually did not. So if I click on 2, it's still going to give me an error, which is, it gives me a 400. So let me go to the network and let me check what's up here on my cheats on the side, because I have two monitors, because that's how everyone does it. I just want you to know that that's how everyone does it. We don't just know how to do these things. But the method is delete. Oh, I know why. It's because I did this. I actually did not need the second monitor. God damn it, and now I just told you all my secrets. That's just sad, you know? It's just goddamn sad. So now if I click on lol2, apparently I still get an error. Let me do it again. It still gets undefined because the ID is undefined. Okay, so let me go to this transaction. And here, what is the ID? Is it underscore ID? I think it is. Yeah, it is. It's underscore ID. It's the Mongo thing, you know, the Mongo thing. Okay, there we go. Reload this page, click here, and it deletes it. So as you can see, like, after all of this, one thing that we've learned, also, let me do the same thing here. So if onSuccess, actually run onSuccess, and default this to an empty object. So one thing that we've learned here is that a lot of this is very similar, but it's very useful to be able to do these things. So you can just call onSuccess, or you cannot, like, it's up to you. So yeah, I hope this has been useful. We're still one left, and that is the editing one. We're gonna do it in the next lesson, which shouldn't take very long. So just hammering over the mutations, I think it's a very important part of why ReactQuery is very powerful. So we're just gonna hammer down this last mutation about the editing, and yeah, see you then.